Tired of feeling tired? Done with diet culture? Overwhelmed by conflicting nutrition and fitness messages? Then join us, your hosts of the Nutrition Revolution podcast, as we take a deep dive into all things women's fitness and nutrition. I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Tabitha. And together we are debunking diet culture myths and giving you the tools you need to finally see the results you're looking for.
Today we are going to be talking about perimenopause, and this was one of the questions that we got a lot from listeners, and when we had our
launch party.
Yep, there it is, launch party. Perimenopause seems to be like the big question right now for women. And I think that people are talking about it more. People didn't used to talk about it. I know my mom, when she went through it, she was like, I had no idea what to expect because my parents didn't talk about it. Her aunts didn't talk about it. And she kind of felt super alone in that. Even her doctors were like, well, once you don't have your cycle, then, menopause, surprise.
Well, there's a lot of stigma around it too. It's the same thing with the menstrual cycle. It's
right.
Like for you, when I was growing up, even like you didn't really want to talk about it with other people. And it was kind of like when you were on your period, like, oh my gosh, don't you dare let someone else know, like maybe, your mom or your girlfriends, but like you surely didn't want a man to know, like it was something that's like to be ashamed of almost.
Yeah. And I feel like I didn't know that there were cycles of your period until, there's like the different phases. I didn't even know that was a thing.
The 4 different phases. Yeah.
I was just like, oh, nope, I'm
cycle.
on my period when I'm bleeding.
Yeah.
Like that's it. And then, you don't even know. And I feel like even just that research has been helpful. So I think that perimenopause has been a big issue for women because they don't know what to expect. But I think it's interesting, some of the things that we now know about perimenopause. Do you want to kind of go and tell us some of the things that you, in your research?
Yeah. So I think it's fun to start with, like, how did we get to this point? How is it 2024? And there are generations of women that really don't know anything about or don't know much about what their body's going through the perimenopause transition and then into the post-menopausal transition. And I mean, it really comes down to medical misogyny, to be completely honest. Just the research and funding for women's health and anything that impacts women,
the female health,
is not
at all.
Yeah, exactly. Has not always been there. So if we take a little walk back in time and get a clearer understanding of like the sociocultural construct around perimenopause and menopause, you got to go all the way back to like 400 BC with Hippocrates. And for our listeners, he was the leading physician in the Greco-Roman world. He's actually considered the father of medicine for his contributions with like the use of prognosis and the classification of diseases and clinical observations. Some people know have like heard of the Hippocratic Oath. It was from the Hippocratic School of Medicine. So he's the guy that basically set medicine aside as a profession. And he described menopause as a climacteric syndrome. So a critical point in a woman's life where having a weak uterus caused women to lose their power. So that's really setting the stage.
Yeah.
Like historically I think that the stigma and the shame around menstrual cycles as well as the menopause transition.
You basically can't have kids anymore, so you are worthless.
Right. Yeah. Something you've lost your power because you have stopped menstruating. So that's interesting.
Crazy.
So if we fast forward a couple hundred years, now we're like in the 1600s during the Puritan times. It's really interesting. We know that most of the witches that were burned at the stake were actually women going through perimenopause and some like postmenopausal women.
That's crazy. I love this. I love this history because I love all of that. So it's super interesting.
So by the 1700s, physicians had started arguing that women ages 45 to 50 developed hysteric fits. So it's like the language, the use, right?
Yeah.
Hysterical, loss of power.
Yeah.
Those are all like negative connotations to describe something that half of the world's population, if they live long enough, will go through.
Right. I think it's also interesting that humans are the ones who live long past their like having babies and having kids. Like humans are the ones that live that. Yeah. Where like animals and stuff don't. So it's like, it's interesting that this is the man's take on menopause.
Yes. So these hysteric fits, essentially we're equating menopause with insanity, right? And that it affects us on a psychological level. And the prevailing belief at the time was that menstruation eliminated toxins from the body. So every month when a woman would start her period, those built up toxins would be eliminated. And so when we stopped having our cycle, when menstruation no longer was happening, basically there was like a poisonous buildup of toxins in our body that led to the night sweats and the hot flashes and these hysterical fits. Okay, so that's where we are now in the 1700s. By the mid 1800s, the medical community was closely associating menopause to insanity, and many women were put into insane asylums by either their husbands or their fathers if they were unwed women at that time, and they were forced into having hysterectomies. The thought being that like this will stop everything that they're going through and these changes, right? And it was 1821 that the word menopause first appeared in a medical journal. By 1839, it was called the death of the womb. And by the mid 1850s, there was like a spiritual or like an evil. They thought there was like evil consequences. Okay. That this was somehow like...
if you did something wrong, this is the attack that your body's going to have on you.
And then also like this is like a consequence of like the fall of Adam and Eve. Oh, gotcha. Right? If you like from what we're talking now about like Christianity.
She ruined everything.
Yeah, I mean...
painful childbirth, menopause.
According to Christian patriarchy, yes. So now we're up to like the 1900s. And of course, with the 1900s came good old Sigmund Freud. And he taught that menopause was actually a neurosis and that the symptoms were the physical response to the issues of a woman's loss of youth and fertility. So again, it wasn't just that this was just a natural consequence of aging, right? Yeah. And also like population control, because like, could you imagine being 65 and you can still get pregnant?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, holy moly.
Please no.
Instead of it just being like a natural part of being a woman and the natural aging process, it's like, oh no, these women are insane.
So it's all cognitive. It's all in our brains, all in our minds.
Exactly. And it actually wasn't up until this point too, like women were excluded from any randomized controlled trials. And it wasn't until 1989 that the NIH, the National Institute of Health, began encouraging the inclusion of women in these RCTs, but it still wasn't a law. Finally, in 1993, Congress wrote the NIH inclusion policy into law, but there were loopholes. And so it wasn't necessarily difficult for researchers wanting to conduct a study to just exclude women on the basis of like, oh, well, you know, depending on where they were in their cycle or, you know, if they were pregnant or, you know, lots of, and I mean, obviously that's still a factor today, right? There's, you know, you have to be very careful with those things. But the point is there were loopholes. And so it was easy to still be able to exclude women from medical research and these studies. But if you fast forward even today, as of 2021, 42% of randomized controlled trials include women. So that's still less than half. Yeah. And in the field of nutrition and fitness, as of 2022, 96% of the research is still conducted on men. So I think one of the like benefits of like social media and, you know, these medical professionals, these OBGYNs and urologists and women's health experts that have a platform now to reach people. There's a lot of like outcry for information on women's health.
I think that is true. Like growing up, I never heard anyone talking about menopause or that I would even lose my cycle. You know, no one was talking about it, but I feel like
it's changing.
It's changing because of social media, because women are on there trying to find answers independently. And I think there's now a need for it. People are like, oh, I'm not the only one going through this. Like, you're not feeling lonely anymore, or like you're going crazy, because you're seeing women all over the world who are also going through something that you're going through, where before it was just all controlled, you know, studies that you didn't really ever hear anything about. So it is changing. I think we are seeing a shift in people talking about it and asking questions and not being afraid to be like, hey, this is how I feel. And also knowing that it's not a cognitive dysfunction.
Yeah, it's not psychological. It's not a neurosis.
You're not going crazy. It's that
Mr. Freud was wrong.
Right. It's your hormones that are causing the problems.
And
But
and
like,
that
you don't
it's
just need to
inevitable
go.
too.
Yeah.
It's not something that like only some people are going to go through. If you are a woman,
Yeah.
you live long enough, you are going to experience the menopause transition, which
Right.
encompasses perimenopause and then the post-menopausal season of life.
Right.
Like, it's not like I'm going to opt out, or, oh no, I'm one of those that like didn't experience that. So with half the population being female,
Yeah.
this is important. It's a big deal.
We kind of need to know what's happening with our bodies.
Well, and I feel like women are so much more empowered now,
Right.
than ever before. Even my mother's generation, women that are in their late 50s and 60s, there was just the stigma and the silence and shame around, like, you just don't talk about these things,
Right.
and suffer in silence. And that is not the case anymore.
Right.
And I'm here for it.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
I am.
That's how if you've ever wondered why there's so much like silence around menopause and how
why are we still just now learning new
in
things
2024
in 2024?
This is why. I mean, themes of death, insanity, weakness, loss of power.
Right.
That is what, shaped the socio-cultural construct of menopause
Right.
in Western society.
I think it's
pretty
why there's
interesting.
still so much unknown about menopause, and why there's still so much of like, you can try this and then you can try this and then you can do these, and no one really knows one way to heal your body or get through menopause in an effective way.
Yeah, I mean, that's changing. There is, like I said, there's a lot of healthcare professionals, medical professionals that are using their platforms and social media
Thank God. Yeah.
to spread awareness.
Yeah.
Some of the ones that I really loved, Dr. Kelly Casperson, she's a urologist. She does the You Are Not Broken podcast.
Okay.
She's got a lot of really great information about women's health and hormones. And then Dr. Mary Claire Havard, board certified OBGYN, she wrote the book, The New Menopause, which I highly encourage our listeners of any age, like even if you're in your 20s, even if you're a man,
Right.
if you have a wife, you have a mother, a daughter, sister, it's
helpful to know what they're going through, so you don't think they're just going crazy.
Exactly. And their research is there now supporting, menopause hormone therapy. There's specific new training and fitness protocols that you can implement to help your body through this transition, make that transition as healthy as possible, maintain your muscle mass, your bone density, all those good things.
Yeah. There's a podcast too. It's called Better with Dr. Stephanie.
Okay.
And she has a really good, like menopause workshop that she talks through, like a couple different parts, and she's really good.
What is her background?
She's a chiropractor.
Okay. Oh, I love that.
So she talks a lot about bone health and, your physical body going through menopause. So
yeah, no, because absolutely. I mean, I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves now, but like, there are estrogen receptors in every organ and system of a woman's body.
Right.
And so as we go through perimenopause and then into postmenopause, that menopause transition. So when we say menopause transition, just so our listeners know, we're talking about the perimenopause, which is before, and then post, which is basically the rest of your life following.
And menopause being you haven't had your cycle for 12 months.
Yeah. So menopause in and of itself, and that's something too that always blows my mind, is that there's still some women that I talk to that aren't actually sure of that. So menopause itself is just the one moment in time where you've gone 12 consecutive months without a period. And then at that point, you are considered to be postmenopausal. So it's literally perimenopause are the years leading up to it. And then postmenopause, it's like your new birthday.
Well, yeah, so I always tell people the way that I kind of learned about it was that it's basically like the new puberty. Like you're going through a different kind of puberty as a female.
Yeah.
Your hormones are changing. Things are happening that you don't even realize are going to happen. So think about when you were a teenager, you got zits and you got facial hair or whatever, whatever happens through, goodness, I'm not ready for this when my kids go through puberty, but all those things that change during puberty, you as a female are now going to go through like a new puberty. So it's interesting. It's like the parts of pregnancy without the baby.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of clients who are like, oh my gosh, I can't sleep. I'm craving sugar. Like I'm doing all of these things. I was like, it's like you're pregnant again, but you're not going to have a baby this time. And so
it's estrogen is closing up shop, packing her bags, and she's walking out the door and she's not looking back. Yeah. And so it's all of the changes that occur. And, like I was saying earlier, there's estrogen receptors in every system and organ of our body. And so as those levels, estrogen and progesterone, start to fluctuate, and basically eventually get to the point where it's, flatlining, essentially,
right.
There are significant changes in the things that, what I hear from my clients that I work with is like, the way that I used to eat and train no longer works.
Right.
And it's true. You have to adapt. And you have to make some changes to support yourself through that that transition.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you said the word fluctuates. And I think that's important to hit too, is that it's not just going to like steady down. Like you're not just going to have it like gone one day. It's going to like estrogen's going to be flaring up one day and then like down another day. It's going to fluctuate back and forth too. So
throughout throughout your cycle and then cycle to cycle, because there are definitely women as they get into their 40s that will be like, now my cycle was steady anywhere from like 30 to 33 days. And now I'm having like 26 day cycles randomly, but then I go back to a 30-day cycle. Or even as some of my clients that are more like mid 40s, mid to late 40s will be like, I just went 3 months, no cycle, thinking like, oh, maybe this is it. I'm on my way. And then like, boom, I wake up and then I've started again. So
it's regular again.
It's everything in between is that menopause transition. And I do think it's interesting to note that it encompasses anywhere from the 10 to 15 years before menopause. And remember, menopause is just that one moment in time where you've gone your 12 months.
So I think that I'm starting to see, I think this starts with puberty too. Like girls are getting their cycles earlier now. And they're also saying that people are going through menopause earlier now. So your cycle, I think oftentimes you can look at your mom and see like if she went through early menopause, you probably are going to also
the genetic component.
Mm-hmm. Like
yeah, that's a real thing.
Into that, like the foods you eat and the, lifestyles that you live are going to play into it. But I'm seeing people as early as 35 who are having symptoms. Yeah. And then the average is like 51, 52 for
51
menopause.
51 is the average onset of menopause in American women. And so anywhere, 51, And so anywhere like that 10 to 15 years. So it's not outside the realm of possibility for a 35, 36-year-old woman to begin noticing changes in her cycle. And that's kind of the start where all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, my cycles used to be like clockwork. This was the length. And then that's changing.
So let's kind of talk about the phases of like, so for people who don't go, who don't know much about menopause, maybe they don't have family that talks to them or they, haven't even thought about it. It's not on their radar. The way I kind of learned it is there's like a couple different phases. And the first is that it's like my cycle's starting to shorten, like things are changing. I was 30 days and now I'm 29 days. So that's kind of the beginning. And then there's the next phase where your cycle's kind of irregular. Like it's starting to be there for a month and then maybe not. Maybe you're having it for 2 weeks, maybe you're not. And then at some point it kind of goes long, like 60 days sometimes. And that's where you're going to start to notice a lot of the symptoms of menopause, which we'll get into. But then that last phase is kind of like the waiting room where you're just like, I haven't had it for 4 months. And then boom, there it is again. And then you're just kind of waiting, like, is this the last time I've had my cycle? And you're just kind of waiting. So some of those symptoms are...
the big ones are the vasomotor symptoms, which are going to be your hot flashes and your night sweats. And a lot of women begin complaining of those. They're experiencing that late 30s into their early 40s.
Yeah. So the other symptoms would be like not wanting to be touched. Maybe you're not as like feeling snuggly. And I remember my mom being like, oh, sometimes like people hug me and makes my skin crawl. And I used to think like, that's so mean. But now I'm hearing lots of people say like, there's times that I don't want to be touched. Low libido, more aches and pains, easily overwhelmed. That's what I'm seeing a lot. People getting like, can't handle stress the way that they used to, can't handle like, distractions or, life the way that they feel like they used to. And so they're getting angry or frustrated or sad and just like so overwhelmed. And I think that I'm like, that's normal. Like that is part of it.
Normal to experience that. Yeah. The musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause. So like women, unexplained joint pain, aches and pains, where it's like you didn't do something specific. It's not like you went out and like played tennis for 4 hours and you haven't played tennis in years. Like the frozen shoulder, the hip pain, and discomfort.
Is a big one too.
Yeah. Those are all like all the waking up and then all of a sudden things are aching and hurting, plantar fasciitis that you're not normally experiencing, and that has come on suddenly with no like clear definitive like point of origin. Like this injury happened.
Yeah. And if you think about like when you went through puberty, there was like the muscle aches and the muscle cramps. So now in menopause, you're still getting those aches and pains, just different. A lot of the like, man, I always hear when I was a teenager, I could sleep upside down on my head backwards or whatever. And now in my, 40s, I slept on a pillow wrong and I, wake up feeling terrible.
My neck hurts for days. Yeah. I think it's really important for women to understand too, because one of the biggest pain points that I hear is that their body composition is changing, even though they are still being mindful of what they're eating and they're working out regularly. They're trying to be healthy. Yeah. Our insulin sensitivity changes and our gut microbiome also changes. So it's not uncommon for women to begin experiencing gastric upset with eating certain foods that they did not have those issues with before. And it's not that they've suddenly developed this allergy after 45 years. It's menopause. It's the changes within the gut and the body's ability to take insulin or take the glucose into the cells. Like we're not as sensitive to insulin.
Yeah. There's that menopause tongue where a lot of women experience like they can't handle heat or salt the way that they used to. Like your tastes are literally changing, and that can be one of those symptoms too. Depression, anxiety, dryness, vaginal dryness. We have to talk about that one too, because that's a big symptom.
Yeah. That's the urinary genital.
Yeah. Urinary genital symptoms. And then also like your cycles when they do come are more intense. They can be more intense with like migraines or cramping, things that you maybe even didn't get before. Those can change too.
A lot of women aren't sure what to do with the ultimate problem that hormones are flatlining, and how to get help for some of these symptoms that we've talked about. And I think it's important for women to know that they have resources available to them. So I like to refer clients to menopause.org, and you can find menopause certified and the qualified healthcare professionals in your area that you can talk to them about menopause hormone therapy. It is now known to be very safe and effective for helping through this menopause transition. So definitely seek out the healthcare, the qualified healthcare providers for menopause hormone therapy. However, the menopause hormone therapy will help with the musculoskeletal issues and the vasomotor and the urinary genital symptoms, but it will not address the body composition. So that's where your nutrition and your fitness, your training has to change or make changes to support maintaining and building lean mass still and maintaining strong, dense bones.
Right. And then I also think doing things for your stress management, because that's going to be a big thing too.
Absolutely.
Just feeling unmotivated and stressed out. So, whether
and that's lifestyle stuff at any stage that you're in,
right?
But definitely when you add in all these other things that are happening, it may be for some women the first time where they're like, wow, I'm really stressed out because they are stressed out about all of the changes that they're experiencing.
For sure.
So I think it's a multifaceted approach, right? That there's, if in your menopause toolkit, you're going to want a bunch of different tools, and menopause hormone therapy may not be the route that every woman wants to take, but it definitely is there and can help women with easing these symptoms and easing into this menopause, through this menopause transition.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I think some other things that can be helpful, and I know it's something that I am getting ready to do, is getting like a baseline blood work done of my hormones to see, where I am. Like I'm not quite 40 yet. So trying to see am I experiencing any changes in that? So I want to know, what are my hormone levels now so that I can kind of keep track. So I think they say it's best to do it when you're like in your early 30s, but as I'm figuring things out and learning things now, I'm like, oh, well, I better do it now. Better do it quick. And And so just kind of, having a baseline, knowing where you are, and then just tracking your cycle. I think a lot of people don't do that. And there are so many apps. I just put mine in my Google Calendar. But tracking
I have a
your
note
cycle
on my phone.
Do you? Yeah.
I just keep a note. Yeah.
Yeah. Just keep an eye on your cycle, because I think that can give you so much information, not just even for menopause, but for your workouts, for your nutrition. Like, I have all of my clients track their cycle if they're doing nutrition with me. So
yeah, I think that it's really important for women to be aware of their cycles. And there are a lot of healthcare providers that are now saying that, like, your cycle is a really big indicator of your overall health. So
absolutely,
it's important
for
women to know what their cycles are like, and if there are any changes, and be, to figure out what's going on, and take that data to their healthcare provider when they are looking for other answers or help, so that they can say, like, look, this was what was normal, and then these are the changes, and it just,
So I think for this episode, I think having them, if you're listening and you're interested in this, or you feel like you're entering this stage, I think follow some of these people that we have recommended. Start tracking your cycle. If you are, interested in getting your hormones and seeing what they are, contact your primary and get some testing,
some blood work done. Yeah. And you'll need to do that more than just like one and done, because even in your reproductive years, your estrogen and progesterone ebb and flow week to week throughout your cycle. So you get those done, and maybe estrogen and progesterone look like totally normal. I would say ask for repeat testing to look for trends. But also, if you are 40 something, you're going through it. It's highly unlikely that you are not experiencing some of the changes, and that you are not in the menopause transition. It's pretty likely. So I think it's important for our listeners to know that there's hope, and there is help, and there are resources available, and
you don't have to be alone.
Yeah, you're not alone. Every woman that lives long enough will be going through it. I think letting your partner know too what you're going through.
That's such good advice.
I talk about it all the time still with my husband, just because even though, like, I'm 39, but I have noticed changes in my cycle over the last 3 years. And I've noticed this because I track.
Right.
So I've noticed these changes. I think things are beginning to move very much into that. I'm in perimenopause, and I talk about it with my husband, and I'm like, hey, listen, these are some of the things that I am likely going to begin experiencing over the next few years. So, like, maybe buckle up.
Yeah. I don't know, like, hang on to your horses.
Buckle up. And then but it's awareness for him too. Yeah. Like, some of the things that I've shared with him. So ladies, if you're listening, talk to your partner, talk to the men in your life that are important to you.
Especially hearing the history of it. If that's what we've been told, or what, they've studied as like it's a cognitive issue, like, then they're going to be like, you need some therapy, or you need whatever. No, I actually just need some hormone testing, maybe some replacement there. Like, I just need, these certain things to get through it. It's
emotional syndrome.
It is a physical, my body is physically changing.
There are psychological ramifications of it. Right. Absolutely. We know that. I mean, it impacts the brain everything. For sure. Like, women are more susceptible to Alzheimer's.
Faking it. We're not pretending. We're not exaggerating.
It's not us being literally crazy.
Can we please don't burn us at the stake.
Can we please, accept this as a normal, natural part of being a woman, and then let's focus on the tools and resources to help ease us through this transition, to make it as painless as possible.
Yeah, and if you have daughters, talk to them about it too, because I think that's important. That's something that my mom was very open with us once she started going through it. Was like, here's what's happening. I want you guys to be set up for success with this, because I wasn't. And so she's been very good about telling us her symptoms and telling us what she does to feel better, or what she, is managing through. So if you have family that, talk to them about those things too, because the more information, the more we know, the better we can do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Knowledge is power. So if you take anything away from this, know that you're not alone. This is a very normal part of life, but one of the perks of living in 2024 is that there is, like, I feel like this menopause revolution.
Yeah.
Where women are demanding answers, and they're wanting help, and there is more and more research being done in this field for women. So while there's still a long way to go, change is on the horizon, and I'm really hopeful for like my generation and my daughter, my daughter's daughter one day, this is becoming less of, hush hush, don't talk about it.
And hopefully
it's a
one
woman's
day,
problem that it's like, this is a humanity problem.
Right.
Or this is, something that needs to be researched and studied and
hopefully one day that it will become like a medical funding, like they will get medical funding to do more research for
and there's been a lot of push for more and more. So things are trending in the right direction, but change is slow, especially when you're talking about a country that has over 300 million people. It's going to take time, but absolutely there's been more money through NSF and NIH put into menopause research than ever before. So it is a great time to be a woman, but definitely listeners, follow menopause.org to find the certified, qualified healthcare providers near you, and then go on social media and look for some of those doctors, physicians that we shared earlier.
And we can link some of those too.
In the show notes?
Yeah, in the show notes.
That's a great idea.
We'll link some of our favorites in the show notes so that people have some information.
And stay tuned. We'll have Menopause Part 2, where we will talk more specifically about the nutrition and fitness protocols to help with the body composition changes through that transition.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thanks for spending your time with us. If you found this podcast helpful, we would love for you to share it with your friends and family. And don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform. If you have nutrition or fitness questions you want answered on future episodes, we would love to hear from you. You can submit these questions to our email, thenutritionrevolutionpodcast@gmail.com, and follow us on Instagram @thenutritionrevolutionpodcast.